Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and we are back ready for a Friday morning game preview against the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks will host the Giants on this Sunday, October 6th at 4:25 at Lumen Field, and we're ready for our first game potentially without Malik Nabers. How are you feeling, Cranky Fan?
Well, life is good. Our football team may not be and might be in for a rough road on Sunday, but I'm feeling good.
Couple things from this week. The New York Giants signed kick returner Kearis Jackson, and I guess I don't know if you remember him as a former Georgia Bulldog.
I do not.
Yeah, okay. I didn't think you did.
No.
Is this a sign that they finally are taking special teams seriously? Now, we've seen last year they had enough embarrassing moments where they finally signed Gunnar Olszewski. They re-signed him this year. And it's been a couple weeks, and now it looks like they're signing a full-time kick returner. When Olszewski got hurt, we saw them sign a new punt returner. They didn't just jam somebody back there. You know, I've been pretty critical on their lack of preparation for special teams and not taking it seriously. But is this a slow, steady improvement? Maybe?
I think it might be, and I think it also predicates on the fact that the only way this team is going to win is kind of on the margins. I mentioned on previous shows that they got to get games in the muck, low scoring, don't make mistakes. And, winning on the margins means instead of, starting on the 20 or 25 yard line, it's starting field position on the 40 maybe. So, we're not bringing in, Devin Hester or Billy White Shoes Johnson or anything, but anything that can give us that extra 2% on the margins, I think it may help this team between a win and a loss. So I think that's kind of maybe what they're thinking.
I'm kind of just spitballing here, but
spit away.
Is this sort of like I'm trying to think, like, is this a failure to? No, I don't know. I can't tell if this is like a failure to develop your 52nd and 53rd players on your roster into viable special teams players, or if this is perhaps just not a good enough roster where player 52 and 53 are solid at kick return, punt return. You know what I mean?
I think it's the latter. I think if you have
where it's just like, you don't need as much depth because you trust your depth and you trust your starters. Therefore, 52 and 53 can be, like, this is sort of a bad example because of the contract he was given. But if you remember, like, Dwayne Harris when he was here,
sure.
Yeah, he got a 4-year contract. They envisioned him being a wide receiver, but really he was an accomplished special teams returner. That's and correct. He functioned as wide receiver 4. You know what I mean? Like, is it really that, you think? Or do you think that this duo of Brian Daboll and Joe Shane just devalue special team? Because, like, there's also this lack of preparation there where you just have no kicker for a game, and even though there's empty roster spots. So it's a little hard to tell.
That's more of an organizational problem. And again, we really don't know exactly who's call is that final 53. Is that a combination of the two making the decision? Is that more Daboll? Is that whoever? So we really don't know who has that final say in turning in the sheet and says this is the active roster for that game. I think the biggest thing is when you're a bad team, when you get to roster spots 50, 51, 52, 53, you're dealing with guys that probably shouldn't be in the NFL anyway because it's a bad roster. And, and also if you are a good roster and a good team, you're not worrying so much about special teams and some of the little things on the margins, like I mentioned before. So I think it's just a byproduct of just having a lower than average roster with less depth than good teams do.
I don't know if it's not if you're a good roster, you don't worry so much about special teams because can't really think of too many good teams that, consistently turn the ball over on special teams. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
It always seems that their fifth best player is actually like a pretty decent return guy or a really good gunner or something, always like forcing fumbles. You know what I mean? That's when I think of a good roster and their special teams, it always feels like their backup linebacker is walloping people on kickoffs or something.
mhm.
It's never like, I don't know. Or
There
at least it's rarely like there's like, because there's only so many special teams aces in the league. You know what I mean?
there's also just some head coaches in the NFL and in college that emphasize special teams more than others. I mean, I remember, having Urban Meyer as the Florida coach, and he treated special teams like a true, the cliche, it's one third offense, one third defense, one team special team. He truly did it. And that team was a master at block kicks, block punts, punt returns, kickoff returns, all of these different things. And some coaches just don't emphasize it. I don't know why. That it lack of attention to detail, lack of focus. Other fires are trying to put out first before that. I don't know, but it maybe this is just a team that just doesn't prioritize special teams. That could be to our detriment, especially again when we're playing a lot of low scoring, close games. It's going to come back and bite them.
In
Now,
other,
the thing with the 52 men on the roster, that's unforgivable.
yeah.
That is a different situation. Hopefully, it'll never happen again. But as far as the talent on special teams, we just have to keep monitoring and seeing as this roster hopefully gets better.
In other news, injury front looks like a mixed bag, but some really really bad in there. So we do have some limited practice today, Thursday, from Brian Burns, who is dealing with a groin. Adoree Jackson and Drew Phillips look like they are back to practice after sustaining some calf injuries and missed the last game. Wan'Dale Robinson showed up with a heel issue. But the really bad news is Malik Nabers has not really advanced in the concussion protocol, which means by the time you're listening to this, we'll have known if he practiced on Friday at all. If he does, there is a slim chance he plays Sunday. But I think at this point, A, he's not going to practice, and B, even if he's cleared by the doctors, I'm not sure that Brian Daboll wants to, 5 weeks into this man's career, start throwing him right back out there. And I don't know. You
And
agree
guess
with that,
what?
right?
I completely agree. And if they throw him back in there, you know, this giant offense is giving him 15 targets. So
Hmm.
that's 15 potential times he can get rocked again, and if he's not 100%. So they're not going to bring him back and just be a little decoy thing. They're going to bring him back and they're going to play him. So I I hope for, this is week 5 of a season that's spiraling anyway. He's got a potentially long, great career. I would like to get him healthy and, we'll live to fight another day with him.
If you're Brian Dable and you want this job next year, I don't think you play Malik Nabers.
Exactly.
And like I've been a big proponent of the concussion protocol follows an independent doctor, so it's okay to listen to the doctors.
Hmm.
And maybe if this game meant something more, maybe if this is a win and in game, or something like that, you play him because he is cleared to play, whatever.
Hmm.
But I think if you want any shot at this job next year, you don't risk this man's career. And I think that, Daniel Jones's struggles can be attributed to, at least partially, to the injuries he sustained in his career, to the neck, to the head, and to the knees.
Hmm. Well, just look at a guy like Tua. That
Oh,
he
sure.
came back so fast after a concussion, got his second one, and he's never been the same, and he probably never will be the same ever again. And there's no reason for it. Coaches, they know they're coaching for their job, but they also know that unlike fans and sports media and everything, it's not, well, what happened in this game will decide. Any front office worth their salt is going to take the collection, the body of work, and aggregate it and say, we want to go in a different direction or not. So what happens if we win or lose week 5 in a game is it's just one data point in the whole thing. And he knows that his success going forward is having his best players available. And quite frankly, he's our best player right now. And if he misses a game, so be it. But if he ends up missing 9 or 10 games after the fact, that's catastrophic.
I think Malik Nabers also represents the first round pick slam dunk for Joe Shane. Now it's granted it's a lot easier to pick, Malik Nabers at 6 than it is Deontay Banks at 22 or whatever. But
Well,
with 5 and 7, he's gotten a middling start from Kayvon Thibodeau and a very, very, very bad start from Evan Neal. Now, I can't criticize those picks because I agree with those picks at the time, and I agree with them now with the information I had at the time. It's not like they were egregious picks where it's like, I can't believe he did either of those. Those were considered the consensus move around. But nevertheless,
you are
the
your
results
record is
the
kind of
results are the results. Yeah.
right, for sure.
Um, One other thing that let's keep with the injuries. On the flip side
Yes.
of the ball, Devin Singletary also did not practice with a groin injury. We'll see if he practices today, Friday. I'm a little bit less worried about that, although that is a huge blow. This is 2 offensive weapons on a bad offense that are not practicing.
Yeah, especially when we're dealing with one of the worst statistically rushing offenses in the league. If the one guy who's probably the best cog in that is, even if he's limited, that could make it potentially worse.
Although I will say Tyrone Tracy looked pretty good last week,
Hmm.
in his limited action.
Mhm.
None of the running game really looked great. But on the flip side of the ball, Seattle is really dealing with it. There were 20 players that on their injury report, although some of them were non-injury related, they were rest related. I still think that signals some sort of weakness when you have that many players resting.
Sure.
I don't know. Some of them are older players like Jonathan Hankins. But for guys that are actually hurt, I mean, you have 3 guys who didn't practice at all. Byron Murphy with a hamstring, Boye Mafe, and Dodson as well. And then a lot of guys limited, and important ones too. On offense, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant, Farrell Brown. On defense, you've got Leonard Williams, Julian Love, Jerome Baker, Nwosu, Cameron Young. This is a pretty deep injury report, and they're all kind of centered around the same position groups.
Let's also remember too, in a little fairness to them, they played on Monday night, right? So
Yeah,
they
but I
may
think a
they
lot of
may
those
they
guys
may
didn't
be,
even play Monday night.
yeah, but they may be being a little extra cautious with the practice schedule and throwing people. Now, I don't know what the protocol is for putting people on, your limited versus probable or I guess whatever, but um, it's possible that they were just being extra, with the one less day. I don't know. Just a thought.
In some instances, yeah, but I think some of these injuries were sustained in that game, and some of those players didn't play on Monday either.
Gotcha.
So they're pretty beat up.
Hmm.
One other little piece of news from this week that I sort of just had a little mini thought about,
Hmm.
and we'll bring this into playing offense in this game as well. So Daniel Jones was asked by a reporter about the inaccuracies on his deep ball. It's something we talked about a lot in the last episode, and we've been talking about through these first 4 games. And his reaction to his underthrows against Dallas were that earlier on in the season, he was overthrowing the deep balls, and he's sort of kind of joked that he's looking for that Goldilocks. He overthrew first, now he underthrew, now he's just trying to find that spot there. You know, I think that that's the answer that a player gives. So I'm not going to criticize him for any of that.
Totally.
I don't think that that's the issue. I think that there is a genuine lack of precision that has happened since the last time I saw him look good was before the Dolphins game last year. So it seems to be related to the injury for me in some capacity, mental or physical.
I want to ask you a question, and I didn't prepare you for this question. If you want to go back, and watch tape, we can talk about it again in the next episode. Have you noticed anything mechanically different about the way he's throwing since the injury as opposed to before the neck injury?
No, I would have to look back at that, but I will say, week 1, I won't really look at the Raiders game. The Raiders game was horrendous. But week one, the entire offense looked like shit, and it hasn't looked like anything like that since week one. And I'll attribute that to actual rust between all the moving parts of an offense.
Correct.
But he looked pathetic in that game, and since then he's looked a lot better mechanically moving around in the pocket since then. And I would say, I don't know if it's best in his career, but he looks back to that 2022 level of moving in the pocket. He looks confident. And now, granted, he has a actual pocket to move in.
Yeah.
But he does look mechanically like he's moving well with his feet. As far as his throwing motion and stuff like that, I would actually have to like take a body of work and look at it. So I don't.
Yeah,
really
you have a homework assignment for next week because I'm just curious if it's just it's gonna be it could be a few things. It could be he just physically can't get it downfield with any accuracy anymore. He somehow his mechanics have changed since the injury, or is it become mental?
Yeah. I'd have to look into that. But in any case, in talking, the last episode about where the Giants are at a quarter of the way through the season, the biggest problem is probably quarterback, and that's where they could improve the most. But I will say, if Daniel Jones does eventually hit his Goldilocks moment, and he continues being as efficient in the short and intermediate game as he's been the last 3 weeks, and adds at least some semblance of a reliable deep ball where, let's just say, he hits at least 1 out of 2, where the wide open ones he hits the guy or something like that. Just give me at least that. I think that while some may view that as a tragedy of the Giants moving out of draft position to take a top quarterback, I actually will posit that won't be the worst situation in the world. I do think it would be like somewhat optimal if they could replace Daniel Jones as soon as possible with a franchise guy. Don't get me wrong. But if that slowly comes back to him and he becomes this functional, efficient guy underneath with a deep ball element, the impetus to replace him next year is not as strong. You can continue to build this team. I think you can continue to ride out his contract a little bit.
I still think, even if he gets the Goldilocks moment and he can hit an occasional downfield pass or 1 or 2, I still think there's enough problems with this team, the lack of a running game. And that might be partially improved with the threat of a deeper, passing game. And, the defensive concerns that this team's has, that I don't see this team all of a sudden going from, potentially a 2 or 3 pick to all of a sudden the 23rd pick. I think we're still going to be pretty striking position to, if we want to get a quarterback or to make a move without giving up too much capital to get up to the guy we want.
See, I think you're wrong. I don't think that there's enough quarterbacks that are going to come out for, and I don't think that they have enough ammunition to package up a lot of stuff to move up. I don't.
Well, I'm saying, well, my point is that I don't think we're all of a sudden go from 2 or 3 to all of a sudden 12 or 13. I don't think the jump is going to be that great, because I don't think it's just the quarterback and the ability to open up the offense, which is preventing this team from being
regardless.
Yeah.
Pretend they're not in striking distance. My point is that it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think there are other problems on this team that they can adequately address, where they can continue to kick the can down the road a little bit longer. And I know everybody hates that, but
here's a good example of that. Is you could get a better. I think you might have mentioned this a couple of weeks back, where if you have an offense that's functioning in all the ways, it may not be great, but at least functions, you can evaluate. Like right now, Jalen Hyatt is the great unknown on this team.
Sure.
Jalen Hyatt is useless because what he does well, we don't do well, and there's really no point of even having him on the field.
But also, he hasn't done his part to be more than just that.
Understand that.
It's a two-sided thing with Jalen Hyatt.
Understand that, but at least the one thing he does well, like when we had John Ross or something, was at least just have him go out there and run. At least if you can start evaluating and say, okay, we know the baseline of what this guy can do. Right now, we can't even get to that yet. So that's an example, though, of better evaluation of what we truly have, as opposed to, what we've been doing on this team for the last couple of years is kind of playing offense with one arm tied behind our back.
Sure. And that brings us to, how do we beat this Seattle Seahawks team? This is a defensive team, but this is not an all-world team this year. There is quite a dip so far. It's early enough, but they have not blown out any of their opponents despite playing the Denver Broncos. They have in fact been blown out by the Detroit Lions on Monday night.
They scored a bunch too in that game.
They did, but they also gave up 40.
That's true. Yeah.
And that's really kind of the best offense that they've faced thus far. Everyone else, they didn't even blow out the Patriots. They won by 3 points. Okay, so this is not the Seattle Seahawks that I kind of remember,
right,
from the last 2 years. Like I said, though, they're a pretty good defense, and I'm a little worried about them on the edges. They beat the crap out of us last year. That game was tough to watch. Oof. Daniel Jones threw a pick 6. So how do you move the ball against them? Well, it's gonna be fucking hard without Malik Nabers. I'm gonna start with that. That is the ultimate handicap at this point. He's been pretty much 50% of the offense, and I would say the other 35% has been Wan'Dale Robinson, and about 5% has been split between Devin Singletary and Darius Slayton, and that's pretty much it.
And not only is he the majority of the offense, he's really the only guy right now who's creating kind of something on his own.
Yeah.
Never mind. Okay, Wan'Dale, we get the 5-yard, 6-yard pass out to him, but this is a guy who gets it, does that little flip turn around, and there's another 15 yards.
Right.
And we lose that, and
so I think at this point you just have to play to the advantages that you have, and I think that they're hurt specifically in the middle. I mentioned the plethora of injuries. They all seem to be stacked along the front 7 for them. And I think that this is a chance for us to kind of try and swing our weight in advantage there. And this is a tough defensive front that Seattle has assembled there, but they are beat up, so wear them down. You know what I mean? It just has to be one of those things where don't hit the edges maybe so much with the run, and hit them up the middle with the run. Try and do some gap scheme stuff instead of just straight up zone scheme. I think that you can test the backup linebackers over the middle of the field. I think this might be one of those things where if you get some mesh concepts over the middle, or if you can stretch the field deep and really get the linebackers to have to cover a lot of space on the field, you can utilize some underneath and behind them. I think that's really the way to go, is going to have to be like matriculating down the field. And it's going to take a lot of yak, and I think it's going to take a lot of commitment to the running game and wearing down the defense. Because the only advantage really I think you have from offense to defense without Malik Nabers is perhaps a stamina advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this is also a Daniel Jones is going to have to use his legs game too.
Yes.
I mean, definitely. I think, he, like, to your point, that his mechanics running the ball look pretty good. He looks more confident that he can run. I think this is where we have to, whatever training wheels there might be on him, we're going to need that, because that is always the special sauce of Daniel Jones is, that little sneaky ability, even if it's an occasional RPO or just taking off and running, if you see something a little earlier than you would have. Normally want quarterbacks to kind of hang in the pocket a little more, but maybe in this case, use those legs. Every little thing is gonna matter in this game.
When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, I think that really this game becomes, they are stacked at the wide receiver position now. They are, again, like I said, hurt in the same area. I think like 3 of 4 tight ends are on the injury report, with varying injuries. And then Tyler Lockett as well. But that being said, this is a deep group, from DK Metcalf to Tyler Lockett, Smith and Jigba, Jake Bobo, who's a big red zone target, and then you have Noah Fant, all the tight ends there. So this is a pretty deep skill position group. The running backs are good as well. I think that really you have to take the quick game away from Geno Smith and pressure him quickly. Right now, where they seem to be the most busted, and what really frustrated them was Detroit was getting after them. They were getting after them. They were collapsing the pocket really well. Now, Detroit has a very good pass rush, and they like to blitz. When they do, it's very effective. Mm-hmm. I think that, Stone Forsythe, that's a Gator, right?
Gator, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Not very good.
It's kind of shocking he's in the NFL. I mean, he was a nice skater, but I never thought I'd be, watching him on Sunday.
So there he is at right tackle. That has to be an advantage that they have to take advantage of. They have to pressure Geno Smith and take away the quick game at the same time, which means playing physical on the outside. Don't give soft coverage, but that also means you can't give up anything deep. They have to take advantage of the fact that Geno is, he can move, but he's not really a super athletic mover.
Right. Not what he was when he was at West Virginia, for sure.
No, but also that's a more wide open offense. But yeah, I think it's that. Like, if you can take away the quick game, you don't let them get a running game. Obviously, it goes without saying. But it's going to take a lot of things that the Giants haven't done yet this year, which is get consistent pressure on the quarterback and play physical on the outside with wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their stats, they're passing, they're leading the league, I think, in, completions and yards. But if you look at their yards per attempt, it's not that great. It's not an explosive offense. It's a lot of, like you said, take away that a lot of short passes, quick passes, that type of thing. And Grump, I was actually thinking about this over the weekend. One of my deep thoughts when I'm in the shower. It seems like the league, it's the offenses are slowly evolving. It's getting to be more of the, you know, higher percentage, shorter passes, make your receivers, let them do things more. And I'm trying to wonder why. And then it hit me about Geno Smith, because now the narrative is like Geno Smith now is, who knew this guy was such a good quarterback? And you're seeing with other quarterbacks that were, traditionally pedestrian, and now all of a sudden they're having like these, fall romances in their career, kind of playing better. Is it just possible that there just aren't that many good quarterbacks anymore, and we have a lot of average quarterbacks, and offensive coordinators and head coaches are just tweaking offenses to do what their quarterbacks do best, as opposed to trying to make them do things that they're not that good at? Because Geno Smith was, for years, just kind of a backup, kind of an okay quarterback, and now all of a sudden, I think he's a Pro Bowler last year. And there's other examples of that, of guys that, and it's not because they're all of a sudden air raid offenses. It's just they're simplifying offenses and making it easier so they have better completion percentage. They're still accurate guys, but they're not great quarterbacks. Do you think that's a possible reason why the league is shifting a bit?
I think you're teetering on the edge of it. Yeah. I think I feel like I've been saying this, is that we've spent 20 years ago, in like 1999 and earlier, my upbringing with football, coverage of football was not a year-round, in-depth kind of thing the way it is now with the internet and, really the internet and, people like you and me that
specialists,
that just do this. But also just the way the networks cover it. It was never, I mean, like, I read about it in the newspaper. So that being said, when all of that has built up, has also been a 20-year period of bizarrely good quarterbacks all happening at the same time. And I feel like I've been saying this for a while, but our over-analysis of the game, I think, takes for granted that there is a pathway in which you are supposed to build a roster. And that is, you get a franchise quarterback that can do it all, and then you build around them. And it's possible, in my opinion, that in this 20-year period, we just happened to see 20 people that were incredibly good at what they did, and that was a little bit coincidental. I think that probably a lot of very good quarterbacks were given up on in this 20-year period because they were not super great, super immediately. And I think that in a certain way, coaches have used the salary cap sort of as maybe the original motivator for this. Yeah. But really just began modeling more after the college game with the advent of the spread offense and maximizing your best athletes and, getting the most out of what you can with a quarterback that can function. These are not throwaway items just because they are not a quarterback built in a factory, because apparently those don't grow on trees. Mm-hmm. So I think that the solution has been to alter the philosophy around what there is available, supply and demand. This is what mm-hmm. college is churning out, but also I think that this is more typical of what humans can do, and this is how we're going to make it work. On top of that, you also have a bunch of offensive rule changes.
Mhm.
But that being said, I think that there's the other thing is that part of that philosophy for a very long time was if this quarterback doesn't get it together in 2 years, he's a bust and that's it. And then the whole league gives up on them. I mean, Geno made his rounds sorta, but not really. He never really got another shot. And it's very possible that Geno Smith specifically was just a very raw quarterback coming out of West Virginia that was put in a bad situation with a defensive head coach who was mostly on his way out at that
Mhm.
point anyway.
Mhm.
And then was mostly given up on. If you look at his performance in his one performance with the Giants, you can't look at it and say it was a bad performance. It's shrouded over the decision to play him over Eli Manning more so than his actual performance, but it wasn't bad. And then the next time we saw him was with an offensive head coach who's very good with quarterbacks in Seattle, and he's looked good now in 2022, 4,300 yards, 23, 3,600 yards, and this year, it's more of a quick game. I think they're having some trouble with the offensive line this year.
Mhm.
Obviously, you have a coaching change here as well, but he's still thrown for 1,200 yards. It's not like he's become bad.
Yeah.
So I think that
Or
perhaps
or
Geno
or
Smith
is it,
needed a nurturing environment like most other human beings.
and also he hasn't become great. I think there's been a meeting of the minds between an offense that works for him and him getting the opportunity to
But I
execute it
mean,
too.
I would
Yeah.
say he's still been very good. Perhaps
Yeah.
he's not great, but he's still very good. I mean, he's a two-time Pro Bowler at this point.
Right, right, right. But I'm saying that's a lot of it because of being the product of the right environment that was, as opposed to plugging him into whatever and said,
But
okay,
it's not like he doesn't have a deep ball. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's not that it doesn't exist. I think that this year their offensive line is bad, and they have the skill position players, so
No,
there's
I'm not
more
even
quick game this year.
okay. Because I was gonna say I'm not pointing out just for on this year. I'm just talking about just in like the Geno Renaissance kind of
No, I
when.
think the Geno Renaissance includes a deep ball. I think
Mhm.
that this year's team is just worse on offense than last year and the year before.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, like I said, I think they're struggling with the offensive line. Stone Forsythe probably shouldn't be a starting right tackle. Um,
And
that's part of it.
my last point on this before we move on is with this kind of retooling of offenses and this thing, I think this kind of is good news for Daniel Jones for his career in the NFL. Like
Sure.
I don't think he's ever going to be a starting quarterback again once the Giants move on from him. But however, if you're just watching these games this year, when the purpose of having a good backup quarterback is I need you to hold the line for 1 to 3 weeks and don't sink us. And I think Daniel Jones in his last couple of games, if you just look at his stats and look at the eye test, is he can still execute an emergency offense. We don't want you throwing 20 times downfield. We just need you to get the ball in space to guys, be accurate, make good decisions and stuff. So I think the way offenses are kind of, you know, not as air raidy as they were or bombs away, relying on really good quarterbacks. I think this is better for him for having a second chapter in his career as opposed to if this was a different era, even like a 5 years ago era, 3 years ago era. I don't know what his prospects would be once, we move on from him.
We'll have to see because I got to see the accuracy. He's playing an extremely efficient game right now, but it's been
Yes.
3 games. And he's also had the benefit of Malik Nabers, who maybe Malik Nabers is Calvin Johnson with a different quarterback. You know what I mean?
It could be. It could be.
We don't really know right now. I think for sure this is actually a really good test.
Mhm.
How DJ operates the efficient game without Malik Nabers in this game.
Mhm.
Uh, that would be that we might have a better picture of what you're talking about come Monday.
100%. But this is to me, this is just something to keep an eye on as we're, one of the storylines for this year going forward.
Sure.
Mhm.
Let's take a listen to what our predictions were back in like July or whatever.
This traditionally feels like a game where like, oh, there's no chance for the Giants to win, but they've actually, they won a couple. They 2 years ago they went in there and won. So I-
Mm-hmm.
we know from the last episode how I'm pretty sour on this team, this Giant team, but I think there's going to be 2 to 3 games this year where we're going to be a pretty heavy underdog and we're going to win. And I have a feeling this is going to be one of them. I'm going to put this one as a win in pencil.
Pete Carroll leaving the Seattle Seahawks is probably the right time. But that doesn't mean that there won't be a mini slump the first moment he's gone. I like Mike Macdonald as a head coach, but I do think that some level of Geno Smith's success has to do with Pete Carroll. And I think that first-year defensive coordinator as a head coach, they failed to do a lot to help the offensive side of the ball. For some reason, I'm feeling the Giants very strongly in this one. I have this as a win in pen. I just think I think that there's a big dip there with Pete Carroll leaving the offense.
Sure.
Okay, so a lot changes when you don't have Malik Nabers. I'm gonna go first on prediction here since I came in really strong with my win in pen. I have very little faith. I have very little faith in the required physicality from the secondary in this game until I actually see it. You know, people are crapping all over Deonte Banks. I don't think he's played that badly, but the big plays he's given up have been backbreaking. You know, he's also given up a lot of plays where he was doing a lot of things right, and it's just a really good throw and a really good catch. But that being said, playing physical and being able to stay with it and recover is not something that he's shown that he's very good at. Cornerback 2 has not shown that they're very good at anything. Drew Phillips and Cordell Flott have, in fact, shown that they have been pretty good playing physical and in coverage. Tyler Nubin has yet to stand out. Jason Pinnock has been fairly physical. Probably the most stable part of the secondary this year. But until I see a complete unit physicality and shutting things down, I have no faith. I have very little faith that that exists. I have even less faith in the pass rush from the edge until I see it. There's almost none there.
You just took my point. I was going to say it doesn't matter if we can get a pass rush, and yeah, I agree.
And I have absolutely no faith in this offense scoring touchdowns without Malik Nabers until I see it. I mean, none. I will be very, very shocked if the Giants score a touchdown in this game. I don't think that the Seahawks are that great. I don't think that they light up. I don't know. I don't really know how this game is going to go, but I feel like the score is going to be something closer to like 30-9.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the things that I'd be very excited about if we can have more than 20 minutes of time possession. I mean, this is a terrible matchup. Not necessarily how great Seattle is, to your point, but just the one thing that we can kind of do well, we're probably not going to have, and nothing screams to me that that can fill its place. Like all of a sudden, the running game is going to take up the slack, or okay, now you asked for it, you got it. Jalen Hyatt's probably going to get more snaps in this, but what good is it if Daniel Jones is airmailing him or short hopping him or something? So the only way I can see we have any hope for in this game is if we can somehow get anything out of the running game to keep the chains moving, keep the ball out of their hands. Maybe once in our lifetime we can maybe cause a turnover on defense or special teams or something, and little flukiness like that. But our scores are pretty close. I actually had it as 31-6 is my because I just don't see, I just don't see, I don't see the quick score touchdown. I don't see us kind of, 14 plays down field and getting in the end zone or anything. It's just going to be a complete struggle.
Washington is hosting the Cleveland Browns. Washington's been on a roll. Cleveland has been rolling down the hill. I think that this is Washington all the way, although I do think that some of Washington right now is going to get figured out later on this year. But Cleveland, I don't think, is figuring out shit anytime soon.
I honestly had a conversation with my Gator buddies about what about Kingsbury for being the next Gator coach? Because, he had some halfway decent success at Texas Tech. He flamed out, obviously, as a head coach with Arizona. And now this offense looks pretty exciting with Washington. I mean, would he be someone you'd want to take a chance at again?
I mean, and I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't remember the exact timetable of him at Arizona. Was it up until last year, or has he been gone a couple years now?
I think he's been gone, 2 years.
That's what I thought. Okay. But he still assembled a pretty decent team in Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
They flamed out, but
right.
If most of a college head coach's job is recruiting, may not be the worst thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, there might be there's a lot of guys out there, that are just happen to be better coordinators than they are head coaches too. So the follow up to that is I got laughed out of the text group for it, but I'm like,
okay.
well, just thinking about it. I think Washington has got a little bit of an it factor right now, and they're riding super high confidence. I think they win relatively easily.
Yeah, agreed. Dallas is heading to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. Dallas, again, kind of limping along. They are a bit beat up right now with Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. I think Pittsburgh wins this game too, and another team that's just, I don't think is very good, but is continuing to win.
I think when you have a good coach and there's never a worry about a coach being on the hot seat. We're going to stick with this coach through thick and thin. I think that means something. And, there's going to be up years and down years based on talent. But when you have good coaching, this game would be really exciting if it was 1978 and it was Bradshaw versus Starbuck and Roger Staubach and Tony Dorsett and Franco Harris, but it isn't. Let's put this game in the coaching hot seat, Mount Rushmore, because I think Dallas loses kind of badly, and I think I think McCarthy jumps ahead of Sirianni for who is the hottest seat in the division.
Starbuck.
Starbuck was the guy.
Commander Starbuck from Battlestar
from Battlestar
Galactica.
Yeah. Starbuck, obviously.
Yeah. And Edward James almost looks exactly like Ron Rivera.
Congratulations to both for being the least attractive head coach in the league.
That's going to do it for this episode. So we will catch you.
What's Philly doing?
They're on a bye week.
Well, they can't lose.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Philly.
So that's going to do it for this episode. We will see you all on Tuesday morning after the game, and we will have hopefully a game where we can review a win. So until then, we will see you on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course on YouTube. And you can find us on Twitter at @football_grump, @the Cranky Fan. Until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.